begin the fifth lecture in series of this course at General Agriculture Year 01, and I trust it has been exciting all the way. This is our fifth lecture, this is the fifth week, and in the previous topics we discussed what agriculture is all about, we discussed the practice of agriculture, we discussed the types of agriculture, and this fifth week we're going to be talking about the cultural practices of agriculture. When you want to establish a crop, what are the things that you should do? What are the things that you should take note of? What are the things that, how do you prepare your seeds? What are the things that you should do to your seeds before you plant, while on the field, and during harvesting? These are all the things we'll be talking about in this topic. And cultural practices include the pre-planting process, the seed treatment, then we go to the land preparation, then the sowing proper, and after sowing, you have to water, apply fertilizer. You also have to take note of the weed and pest control. These and so many more is what we'll be talking about in this topic. So let us go and learn. Thank you very much. Like I said in the introductory slide, this is the fifth topic, the fifth week of lecture, and I still remain your facilitator, Yetunde Alawode. My email still remains the same at yalawode@noun.edu.ng. Right now we'll be talking about the cultural practices in crop production, and the cultural practices is a complex process. Crop production itself is a complex process involving series of sequential and non-sequential operations leading to the harvest of mature consumable produce. When you see that I changed the ink of some of the um, words there, it's just for emphasis, okay? Just to make you understand it better and to point out the keywords in the definition. So crop production is a complex process and it involves sequential and non-sequential operations leading to harvest of mature consumable produce. And these operations and practices are carried out during the crop production process. The aim of these processes is to create a favorable environment for crop growth, development, and the realization of the crop's yield, the crop's potential yield, and also to produce quality. So these are the reasons why cultural practices is important in crop production, because you want the yield of the crop to be at the maximum level, and you want the crop to be at its best so that you can have what to eat for the growing population. So what are the things that you must do? Right now we want to talk about the seeds. Okay, pre-planting processes involves your taking care of your seeds, the care of your seeds before you plant. So these are the things that you do. The first one is the seed pre-treatment, and it's important for you to do this because some seeds are dormant in nature, and when a seed is dormant, it simply means it's difficult to germinate. You have to assist the germination process, and the reason why it is difficult to germinate is because they possess this hard tester or seed coat and other seed covering. So what happens is that water, air cannot penetrate through this seed coat, so it causes difficulty in the delay of such seed. So to remove the dormancy of the seeds, you have to go through some processes, and it can be removed physically by scarification. Okay, and scarification simply means using sandpaper or by soaking or by cracking the shell. You can soak the seeds in water overnight, like for coconuts, And for amaranthus, you have to soak the seeds in hot water, not boiling water this time, just hot water for some time, so that the dormancy of such seeds will be broken and the seed will be able to germinate very well. Also, some seeds of crop require hot water treatment, like I've talked about. Some require treatment of acid using sulfuric acid to break its dormancy. Some require the cold temperatures, and some require the use of chemicals like the gibberellic acid, which is a plant hormone, or potassium nitrate to break the dormancy of such seeds. Like, for example, the seeds that require cold temperatures are wheat. Wheat requires this cold temperature before it can germinate. The temperature that is reasonably cold below 0 degrees before it can germinate. So that is a way of breaking dormancy in. Also, after breaking the dormancy of these seeds, the next thing you have to do is to treat the seed. You want to protect such seeds from attack, from fungi attack, from bacteria attack, and also from pests and diseases. Okay, so the health of the seed is important, and seed treatment, whether chemical or physical or biological, is a vital input in today's agricultural and horticultural production systems. How do you treat the seeds? Seed treatment fungicides are useful tools to manage seed and soil-borne pathogens. So you use seed treatment fungicides to disinfect the seeds and make them to be non-accessible to disease-borne pathogens. Also, the applied chemicals is absorbed by developing seedling. What the seedling or the seed do is to absorb this chemical, and then they grow with it. And when they grow with it, they inhibit the internal fungal development. Okay, and one of these chemicals is the carboxyl chemical, and also a series of chemicals that you can use to treat the seed are the Apron Plus, the Apron XL, Maxim. These are fungicides that can be used as seed treatment. You apply them as some come in powder form, pink color, you know, you mix them with the seed at recommended doses depending on the size of the seed. So you have to mix them with it and make sure that it is well mixed according to the instruction on the pack. So after mixing it, you keep it for some time before you plant it. For non-vegetative vegetatively propagated crops like the cassava, the yams, you use stem cuttings and yam sets for such for propagation of such crops. You can also use the fungicide powders for them. For example, you can use the benlate and the wood ash. These are very effective fungicides, and you can also dip the fungicide. You can also dip your yam set or your cassava stems into fungicide dips, and you can use them to treat the cassava. Right now, your seed is ready, is well prepared. The next thing you have to do is to prepare your land. The land preparation is the next step, and clearing land clearing involves the preparation of the soil, and you can do that by tillage operations. Okay, wet soil may need to be drained, while the dry soil may require irrigation, because your land has to be properly prepared. It has to be well drained. The texture of the soil has to be loose and well drained. So if it is not so, you have to prepare it. If it is waterlogged, you drain the soil. If there is no water on it, then you require irrigation. So land clearing can be done manually using your machete, your hoe, and it can be done mechanically also using your bulldozers, the stumpers to remove all the tree stumps, the bulldozers to remove everything on the land, and you can also use um, chemical methods, that's using non-selective herbicides for your for controlling the grass, and if you don't want to use all the machines, you can also use the chemicals for controlling the herbs on the field before you can now clear with your hoe and cutlass. You first of all spray the herbicides on the land and clear the grasses. Then you now use your machete. You don't want to use the bulldozers because it has a way of dealing with the structure of the soil. Also, bush burning should be controlled, and this is done to get rid of all the excess debris on the piece of land. After your land preparation, okay, land preparation also involves tillage. Tillage is a way of preparing your land, and tillage simply means turning of the topsoil, and this can be done either manually or traditionally, minimally, mechanically. There's minimum tillage, there is primary tillage, you have secondary tillage, and no tillage. Okay, so the three types of tillage that there is the primary, the secondary, and the non-tillage. And tillage simply means turning of the topsoil. The primary tillage talks about loosening the soil and mixing in fertilizer or other plant materials when the soil texture is rough, and this helps to establish your seedling. Okay, when the texture of the soil is rough and you add your fertilizer and you loosen the soil, so when you put your seed inside it, it grows very well. And non-tillage, tillage involves not tampering with the soil at all. You do not use any form of machine on the soil, and you can plant your genetically modified crops on this kind of soil because they do not require any form of tillage on the soil. They can grow on packed soil. They can grow on packed soil. So that is what no tillage. Secondary tillage involves using your machines like the mow, blow, plow, the disc plow, your arrow, the dibble. This is what the secondary tillage talks about. You are producing a more finer soil in the process. You can see in the picture here, this is what your machine looks like. This is what your this plow looks like. So what you are doing is that you are making the soil to be more finer in texture by using all these harrow, your plow, and what have you. Fine. After treating your seed and preparing your land, the next thing is for you to plant. And seeds of many crops can be planted by direct sowing into well-prepared soils, and direct sowing is achieved by broadcasting, especially for small seeds. You just throw the seed around, like your rice, for example. You broadcast them, you throw them around, and you can also drill holes and put the seeds inside and cover it up lightly with the soil, not heavily. And in manual planting, the seeds are sown using a stick or a cutlass, while mechanical planting is used on a very large scale when you can plant as fast as you can on a very large piece of land. And these mechanical planters can perform combined operations such as seed sowing, fertilizer and pesticide application, and so on and so forth. So that is about. Also, it's important to note that the vegetative propagules are usually manually planted by digging holes in the soil with your cutlass at a reasonable depth, or you can also plant them mechanically. So for some crops require the nursery treatment, like your oil palm, and what you're doing is that you're just trying to assist the crop. So you bring them or you raise them in a nursery first before you transplant them to the field. And your tomatoes also require the nursery treatment where seeds and seedlings are hardened for subsequent field establishment. So transplanting involves your careful moving of seedlings, those seedlings are usually planted in pots. So they are usually in pots, and they are transferred from the nursery to the field, and usually done during the rainy season or under copious irrigation. So you require water so that the seedling can recover from the shock of moving from the nursery environment directly to the field. So you need water to reduce that shock. After planting now, you don't just plant and abandon your field. Okay, there are some post-planting practices, and the first one we'll be talking about here is the thinning. And thinning simply means the removal of excess seedling stands, like you can see in this picture here. The seedling stands are quite many, so what this person is doing here is to reduce it. So he's removing the excess seedling stand. That is what thinning is about. And thinning helps to reduce interplant competition, because every plant would like to compete for sunlight, for nutrients, for space. So when you are putting so many plants in a small space, you cannot get what you're supposed to get as per yield, the correct yield of that plant, except you thin. So thinning helps to reduce interplant competition, thereby creating adequate growth environment for optimum productivity. Thinning is very important. After thinning, you now uh, perform what is called supplying, and this is for missing stands. Okay, this is for missing stands. When you get to your field, when you plant after 3 5 days, you go and check for the germination depending on the crop. Like for maize, for instance, after 3 days you go and check. Some plants like okra, 4 days, 5 days, you go and check. So when you see missing stands, you have to supply. You have to supply, and most times you supply with what you have removed from the pinning. Okay, when you pin, you can use the removed plants to supply somewhere else. So the supplying involves filling of empty stands of crop arising from sowing, germination, or emergent failure. So when the plant refuses to germinate, the seed refuses to grow, then what you have to do is to go and supply. And this seed failure may be due to maybe some goats or some animals will just come and just uproot those plants. And sometimes you may not even grow at all, the seed may not be viable. So you have to supply. In some crops, viable seeds removed during seed thinning may be used as supplying missing stand. After supplying water, in transplanted crops, copious watering is required immediately after transplanting for initial seedling establishment on the field. So you have to use water. Water is very important. Watering is very important for your crops. That is why it's usually advisable to use the rains during the rainy season, plant your crops. Or in case there's no rain, you cannot just fold your hands and look. You have to irrigate. So when you're doing your transplanting, your planting, you need water. That is why in transplanted crops, copious watering is required. Irrigation through controlled application of water over a crop field is required for dry planting and production of crops. And proper irrigation leads to increased yields. Yes, when you irrigate, when you apply water, you get bumper harvest and healthier plants. So watering is very super. Also, overwatering too much of everything is bad. So overwatering is damaging, because what you get is that the soil becomes waterlogged and it does not drain. And when it doesn't drain, the root of that soil cannot be established. So over irrigation is bad. You have to know the quantity of water to apply to your crops so that you will not have this issue of over irrigation. So techniques include the manual system. You can use your buckets, You have a source of water like a stream beside your farm, you get your buckets and go and water your field, or sub irrigation, which is the seepage irrigation, or the lateral move, the side row irrigation, the center point irrigation, sprinkler method, so many kinds of irrigation methods, the surface irrigation, the in-ground irrigation, depending on what you have access to. The most important thing is that your crops get water at the end of. After watering, your crops are starting to emerge, they are now establishing. So the next problem to deal with is the weeds. When your crops begin to grow, the weeds also begin to grow. So weed management is important, and this encompasses all aspects of weed control, including the prevention and spread and land use practices. Okay, now there are different methods of weed management. Different methods of weed management. The preventive method, and this involves the forestalling of the incidence of weed infestation through plant quarantine, animal quarantine, fallow management, farm sanitation, roguing, isolated stands. These are preventive forms of weed control. Okay, in this picture here, this is what the fire quarantine is. You make sure that your plants do not have weeds growing in them. Okay, you want to make sure that you don't transfer weeds from one place to another. So that is why that plant quarantine is important. And also in the animal section, especially when you are bringing plants and animals from another country, you have those sections at the airport. What they do is that they collect them, they keep them in somewhere for some time to see if they will manifest any form of pest or weed attack. If they see anything like that, they destroy it on the spot. Otherwise, they now allow you to bring it inside the country. So the farm sanitation is also important. You go and clear your weed. Anywhere you see weed, you try and uproot it, you remove it. Rogging of isolated stands, there are some crops that you just have to pull out with the weed, okay? And so that they will not infect other crops. So other measures are choice of variety and field. Yes, you have to use varieties that are resistant to weed, and planting rather than sowing. So these are preventive approaches to. Also, another approach is the eradication approach, and this involves the complete removal of weed species. Okay, like you can see in this picture, complete removal of weed species from infested land. And this is achievable in a non-agronomic situation, but undesirable in agro systems. Okay, this can be done when you are planting your arable crops. Okay, you see your weed and then you remove it, because these crops don't spend so long on the field, unlike the agro ecosystems where they spend longer time on the field. So weeds cannot really be removed on a constant basis like that. So eradication approach is another form of weed. You also have the control approach, and this involves the suppression of weed populations to a tolerable level that renders the cropping situation economically safe for agricultural production. So what you are doing in this system is you are trying to suppress the weed population. It's not that you are putting out all the weed all the time, but you just make sure you monitor the weeds so that they will not overtake the main crops that are on the field. Okay, and it's important and environmental friendly. It's the most important and environmental friendly approach, because it requires that the weed grows with the crop, but you just make sure that the weed does not take over the crop. In this control method, you have different methods under this control mechanism, and the methods are the cultural method, the mechanical method, chemical and biological control. And cultural method simply talks about minimizing the number of weeds in the crop, suppressing the competition by surviving weeds, and you are reducing the weed seed production. Okay, and an example of this system is in the shifting cultivation system, and also for the mechanical weed control, you're talking about any procedure governing governing direct physical removal or suppression of weeds on agricultural land. And this includes hand weeding, where you see weed, you pull it out with your hand, hoeing, slashing, mowing. These are mechanical methods. Also, the chemical weed control involves use of chemicals which are called herbicides at toxic concentrations to kill or suppress the weed growth. And these herbicides may be inorganic or organic, and they may be selective or non-selective. The biological weed control talks about the use of natural enemies which are also bioagents in the process of weed control. And these enemies may be organisms like fish, insects, males, they may be parasites, the nematodes, or they may be pathogens. You know, they are using natural enemies to control this weed. And other methods or other these biological control involve light mulch, preferential grazing, cover cropping. These are biological methods of weed control. Now the integrated weed management, which is the most effective, okay, is using one or more, combines one or more of these management systems at low input to obtain a level of weed suppression which is superior to the ordinarily achieved method. So what you are using is you have the physical, the chemical, the biological, the cultural method. So you are either using one or two. You are using two or more, either the physical and chemical method, either the biological and chemical, cultural and physical. You know, you are integrating it, or you can even use all. You know, use all the systems of weed management to achieve your goal. After talking about the weed, after you have removed all the weeds or used the best weed practice, the next one is the fertilizer application. And fertilizers are chemicals. They are using organic or organic chemical materials containing plant nutrients. So what you're doing is that you are fortifying the soil with nutrients so that they can be taken up by the plants. Okay, and what you're doing is you are adding supplements also to the soil to nourish them and to make the soil to retain its fertility. And there are different types, there are many types of fertilizer. We have the nitrogen fertilizer, the ammonium fertilizers, the urea, phosphorus fertilizers, and so on and so. So fertilizers can be applied by broadcasting methods, you just throw them around, or row placement, you place them in rows by the side, or by banding and ringing, you place the fertilizer around the crop, also by top dressing. You can use either of the methods, and micronutrients are normally applied as foliar sprays. So you spray them on the leaves of the target crops. Organic fertilization is also important, and this involves use of manure or compost, and the compost may be crop residues, maybe the natural residues or the straw, or your manure, kitchen waste, whatever it is that you can use to improve your soil. Also liming, that's the use of lime, increases the soil pH of the soil and improves condition for both crops and microorganisms. So these are ways that you can use to improve your soil fertility. Now we want to talk about the green manuring. Just like you can see in this picture here, it consists of plowing in green or non-woody species of plant parts, of living mulch. We call them light mulch. You plow it back into the soil. You're using green parts of the plant and plowing it back into the soil so that they can release their nutrients into the soil. So um, this green manure could be light mulch, could be a cover crop, it could be a fallow weed vegetation or leaf the weed leader. You know, what you do is that you plow it back into the soil. And a major objective of this practice is making nutrients available to the main crop. So examples of the green manure include the Crotalaria species, and here you can see the light mulch is the grass. They are carrying it back into the soil so it can release its nutrients for the crops to take. Mulching also talks about covering the ground in the crop field with organic, either dead or living, or inorganic materials. And this is basically done to protect the soil from degradation and to ensure sustainable agriculture. You can see in the picture here, see the crops, see all this brown stuff in between. These are mulches, okay? They are covering the soil surface and you are preventing the soil from further degradation, you know, and you're also protecting the soil from direct sunlight, from the effect of direct sunlight and leaching and all the ways by which soil nutrients can be um, the soil nutrients can be removed from the soil. So organic mulch materials include crop residues like the straw, the leaf litter, pruning, and inorganic mulch materials include paper, biodegradable and plastic films. All these can be used as mulch to cover the soil and prevent it from the harsh environment. Also, cover cropping is also important for your crops, and this is the practice of planting food and non-food crops which are capable of spreading. So what this cover crop does is that they spread all over the whole place and then they cover the soil and also make the soil to be fertile. Look at it here in this picture. You can see this is a cover crop growing all over the place, covering it in their dense with their dense leaves. They are all over the place and they smother weed growth. They do not allow weed to grow. Once they have covered the surface of the soil, weed does not have any way to grow there. So food cover species include the sweet potatoes, your pumpkin, melons. They spread all over the whole place and cover the soil. And also non-food cover crops are mostly herbaceous weeds, legumes, and fodder grasses. For the pest and disease control, pests cause damage to crops and they consist of both insects, arthropods and non-arthropods, and also the microorganisms that cause the diseases are usually viruses, bacteria, fungi, and mycoplasma, and this causes crop diseases. Approaches to pest and disease control are many and they vary from crop to crop, but they are broadly based on the principles of prevention, control, and eradication in special situations. So these methods include the physical control, the cultural, biological, chemical, and legislative measures. When you talk of physical methods, you are talking of the use of resistant crop varieties that are resistant to both weed and disease attack. And cultural methods include using cultural practices that will suit the crop and destabilize the levels of pest and disease. So you have cultural methods like the crop rotation, the burning, the soil cultivation, soil drainage, crop Sowing time, yes, it's always good to sow early, plant your crops early so that they will have matured before the pests are active, before they reach the stage where they will be destructive. And also removal of alternative weed hosts. So these are cultural methods. When you're talking biological, you're talking of the use of natural enemies, bringing other insects to come and feed on the insect pest that is disturbing your crop. Using pesticides is the chemical method, and the legislative measures include seed certification scheme and preventing the movement of disease plants within the country. So that is the work of the quarantine department to make sure that all the seeds that come into the country are well screened so that you will not bring in diseases from another country into the country. Taking is also another important cultural practice, and this simply means the process of providing support for plants, stems, or vines. You can see in the picture here, tomato. Tomatoes normally grow on the floor everywhere, and by the time you want to harvest it, you see that most of them have been rotten and they have been eaten by all these pests and all that. So you have to stake them. You use sticks, like you can see in this picture here, to hold them up so that they will not have direct contact with the floor. So these are crops that need support, like tomatoes, like your yams. Yam also, in yam staking, you it enhances crop leaf exposure, because the more exposed the leaves are to sunlight, the bigger the tuber under the ground. So you need the stick, the stakes, so that they can raise the leaves and make them accessible to sunlight. Also in tomatoes, staking prevents lodging and fruit rot by infection of the soil pathogen. Having said all, by the time you are through with all those practices, the next thing is your bumper harvest. Once you have already put all those practices in place, then you should be ready for a bumper harvest. Also, it's important to know that timely harvesting is necessary. You don't just leave your crops on the field like that. You have to harvest on time. Otherwise, you just see that the pests and diseases will just go there and harvest them for you. So timely harvesting is necessary to prevent infestation by pests and infections by pathogens. So harvesting can be done traditionally or manually by your hand, or simple use of simple implements like the sickle, the hoe, the cutlass, or it can be done mechanically, like you can see in this picture, using your combined harvester. Okay, especially in cereals. You know, this is a cereal. I think this is sorghum or millet. So they can be harvested using the combined harvester. Now, when you have harvested, you have eaten all what you can eat. The excess surplus is usually good to be stored. So you need a perfect storage system, and that is what we are lacking in this country here. We do not have the resources for a perfect storage. So storage is important so that you can have access to your goods next time you need them. So storage, a good storage condition is needed, and a good storage should be effective against the rain, excessive heat, theft, insects, especially the weevils, and other pests and pathogens. So that is why you store. You store your goods so you prevent them from thieves. You prevent them from disease and pest attack. So a good storage is required. Also, the method of storage is determined by your financial status, the available materials, and the external or climatic conditions. So storage methods can be separated into airtight or non-airtight storage. Airtight, that is the absence of air, and non-airtight, the require air. Now, the next thing we'll be talking about right now is farm mechanization, and this involves um, using your implements on your farm, and they can be divided into two: the farm tools and the farm. The farm tools are mostly simple hand tools that can be used for your manual work. You can see a list of them in the picture here. You have a working pan, the rake, the digging shovel, the pick matter, you have a panga, a machete, a head pan, you have the iron fork hole, you have the hammers, you have a spade fork here. So these are farm tools, simple farm tools. You can see examples there. You can go on and on. You go barrel, recording knife, sickle, a watering can, trowel, garden shears. The list is endless. Simple farm tools. Okay. Now talking about farm implements, these ones are usually heavy and they are driven by animals or by machines. They include your plows, your harrows, ridgers, cultivators, planters, combined harvesters. You can see them in the picture here also. And both farm tools and implements are maintained. You should maintain your machines so that you can be using them from time to time. You maintain them by washing and drying immediately after use, then by greasing of dried parts with engine oil or palm oil. Then you lubricate them also with your oil, your grease. After lubricating them, after you wash them, you dry them, you lubricate them, then you store them in a cool place, preferably a shed or a store, so that they live long. You can use them over and over again. So, having said this, the activity for this week is that I want you to tell me what just these five cultural practices and explain them. And I want you to tell me five farm tools and five farm implements. Thank you once again for listening, and hopefully we'll see next week for another interesting topic. Thank you very much.